Arizona Territory, 1885. The dust-filled heat of Cottonwood Springs settled on Xavier Valentine's shoulders as he dismounted from his chestnut gelding. At 24, he cut a striking figure against the sun-bleached timber of the trading post, tall and broad-shouldered, with a lean strength forged by years of ranch work. His sandy brown hair fell just above clear blue eyes that surveyed the town with wary caution. 3 days of stubble shadowed his jaw, but it did little to hide the youthful handsomeness of his features. Xavier believed in a truth he'd learned when his parents' homestead burned during an Apache raid when he was 12. Attachment was a luxury the West didn't permit. The frontier demanded solitude from those who wished to survive it. Love was a distraction that got good people killed. He'd spent the last decade proving this philosophy correct, taking jobs on cattle drives that kept him moving, never staying in one place long enough for roots to take hold. "Need anything else, Valentine?" asked the shopkeeper as Xavier collected his supplies. "No, sir. Heading back to the Circle M tomorrow. Just came to town for provisions, and maybe a warm meal not cooked over a campfire." What Xavier wanted was simple enough: to earn enough as ranch foreman to buy his own spread someday. A place that belonged to him alone, where he answered to no one. What he needed, the comfort of belonging somewhere, to someone he refused to acknowledge. "Well, town's livelier than usual," the shopkeeper continued. "Stage brought in passengers yesterday, including some fancy folks from back east. Doctor's wife has her sister visiting. Pretty young thing, they say." Xavier nodded politely, but felt nothing. Pretty girls from the East never lasted out here. The West broke their spirits as surely as it broke wild horses. He stepped into the harsh sunlight, adjusting his hat against the glare, when the sound of a woman's desperate cry pierced the afternoon quiet. "Please, someone help." Xavier turned toward the commotion. A young woman stood in the dusty street outside the doctor's house, her pale blue dress stained with blood at the hem. In her arms, she cradled a bundle wrapped in blankets. Even from this distance, Xavier could see the fear etched across her delicate features. Against his better judgment, Xavier crossed the street toward her. "What's the trouble, miss?" Her eyes, startlingly green against her pale skin, locked with his. She couldn't have been more than 20, with long blonde hair falling in disheveled waves around shoulders that trembled with each ragged breath. "My sister's baby," she stammered. "She's burning with fever. The doctor's out on a call, and I don't know what to do." Something in her voice, raw vulnerability mixed with fierce determination, reached past Xavier's carefully constructed defenses. "I've some experience with fever," he offered cautiously. "Ranch hands get sick on the trail." Relief washed over her face. "Thank you. I'm Katherine James. Kate to most." "Xavier Valentine," he replied, following her inside the modest house. "I work at the Circle M." The tiny infant in the crib was flushed and whimpering, her skin hot to the touch when Xavier carefully pressed the back of his hand to her forehead. Memories of his mother tending to his childhood fevers surfaced unbidden. "We need cool cloths," he said, "and willow bark tea, if you can make it." For the next several hours, Xavier found himself working alongside Kate to bring down the baby's fever. As the sun began to set, the infant's skin finally cooled, and her breathing settled into the gentle rhythm of peaceful sleep. "You saved her," Kate whispered, genuine gratitude softening her features. "You did most of the work," Xavier countered, suddenly uncomfortable with both her gratitude and his own strange reluctance to leave. When Dr. James and his wife returned late that evening, their relief was palpable. Xavier found himself invited to stay for dinner, a proper meal at a family table, something he'd avoided for years. Kate's easy smile and thoughtful questions during the meal unsettled him. She was unlike the frontier women he'd encountered, educated but not haughty, refined but willing to work with her hands. "The sister of a doctor's wife," she explained, visiting from Philadelphia after finishing her schooling. "How long will you stay in Cottonwood Springs?" Xavier asked, surprising himself with his interest. Something shadowed her expression. "I'm not certain. I came west rather unexpectedly." The doctor and his wife exchanged a glance that Xavier couldn't interpret, but the conversation shifted to safer topics. As Xavier prepared to leave, Kate walked him to the door. "Thank you again, Mr. Valentine. Not many men would stop to help. Just doing what anyone would," he said, uncomfortable with her gratitude. "No," she replied, her green eyes holding his with unexpected intensity. Not anyone. Not anymore. As Xavier rode back to his room at the boarding house, he found himself troubled by thoughts of Kate James. Something about her story didn't quite fit, like tracks that disappeared too suddenly in the desert. But more disturbing was his own reaction, this unwelcome desire to know more, to see her again. The frontier was no place for entanglements. He'd learned that lesson the hard way. 2 days later, Xavier was loading supplies at the general store when he spotted Kate across the street, walking alone. The wind caught her dress, pressing the fabric against her slender form, and for an instant, he thought he glimpsed the slight curve of her abdomen. She quickly adjusted her shawl, but not before their eyes met. Xavier tipped his hat politely, intending nothing more than a courteous acknowledgement. To his surprise, she crossed the street toward him. "Mr. Valentine," she said, her voice carrying a touch of nervousness. "I hoped I might see you again before you returned to your ranch." "Miss James," he replied, noting the way she clutched her shawl tightly around her middle. "Is your niece recovering well?" "Yes, thank you." Her smile seemed forced. "I wonder if I might trouble you for a favor." Xavier should have refused. He had supplies to deliver, cattle to tend, a life constructed around independence to maintain. But he heard himself ask, "What kind of favor?" "My sister mentioned there might be work at some of the ranches for someone who can cook and keep accounts. I find I may need to stay in the territory longer than planned." Xavier studied her face, noting the educated accent that didn't belong in a frontier town, the fine quality of her dress despite its simple design, and the way her fingers nervously twisted the edge of her shawl. "The Circle M might need help in the main house," he found himself saying. "The owner's wife has been ailing. I could speak to Mr. Morrison." The relief that washed over her face was unmistakable. "I would be most grateful." 3 days later, Kate James arrived at the Circle M Ranch, 10 miles outside of Cottonwood Springs. Xavier watched from the corral as Mr. Morrison welcomed her to the sprawling ranch house. Against his better judgment, he felt a flicker of satisfaction knowing she would be nearby. Over the following weeks, Kate proved herself invaluable at the ranch. Her cooking surpassed anything the Cowboys had tasted in years, and her bookkeeping abilities impressed even the skeptical Mr. Morrison. What struck Xavier most, however, was how she seemed to thrive in the harsh landscape that broke most Eastern women. One evening, as Xavier returned from the south pasture, he found Kate sitting alone on the porch, her hands resting lightly on her stomach, which had grown more noticeably rounded. "Evening, Miss James," he said, removing his hat. She startled slightly. "Mr. Valentine, I didn't hear you approach." "Forgive me for asking," he said, choosing his words carefully. "But are you well? You seem concerned." Kate's eyes filled with tears that she quickly blinked away. "I'm perfectly fine. Miss James, Kate." He corrected himself, surprising them both with the familiarity. "I don't mean to pry, but if you're in some kind of trouble." "I'm not," she insisted, rising abruptly. "I simply needed work and a change of scenery. Nothing more." As she hurried inside, Xavier caught sight of something glinting at her throat, a small locket she normally kept hidden beneath her high-colored dresses. He frowned, troubled by her obvious distress and his own growing concern for her. That night, a thunderstorm swept across the valley. Xavier was checking the horses when he heard a cry from the direction of the small cabin where Kate had been given quarters, separate from the main house. He found her standing in the doorway, her face pale with fear as water poured through a hole in the roof, soaking her few belongings. "It's not safe," he said over the howling wind. "Gather what you can. You'll have to sleep in the bunkhouse kitchen tonight." Without waiting for her response, he began helping her collect her sodden possessions. As she reached for a small case on a high shelf, her dress caught on a nail, tearing at the neckline. The locket she wore tumbled free, hanging open against the fabric. Xavier froze, his eyes fixed on the small trinket. Inside the locket was not a picture, as one might expect, but something engraved in the metal, a name. His name. "Xavier," he read aloud, confusion clouding his features. Kate's hand flew to her throat, her eyes wide with fear. She grabbed the locket, closing it tightly in her palm. "It's not what you think," she whispered. "What should I think?" he asked, suddenly aware of the growing roundness of her middle, poorly concealed by her damp dress. "Is that why you're here?" "No," she cried, backing away from him. It's not my baby, she pleaded, her voice breaking. It's my sister's child. I'm merely helping her. The lie hung between them, transparent and desperate. Your sister's child, Xavier repeated flatly. The same sister whose baby I helped nurse? The doctor's wife who showed no signs of having recently given birth. Kate's shoulders slumped in defeat. Please, don't tell anyone. I'll leave tomorrow. Leave to go where? Xavier demanded, an unexpected protectiveness surging through him. In your condition, alone? Lightning illuminated her tear-streaked face. I don't have a choice. I can't stay here now that you know. Know what exactly? Xavier pressed, stepping closer. That you're carrying a child? That you have a locket with my name? I don't understand any of this, Kate. The storm raged outside as Kate sank onto the edge of her narrow bed. It's a complicated story. I have all night, Xavier said, sitting on the only chair in the small room. I was engaged, she began, her voice barely audible above the rain, to a man named Xavier Parker. He was killed in a train robbery before we could marry. When I discovered I was with child, my family. She swallowed hard. They insisted I go away until after the birth. My sister offered to help. Xavier listened, sympathy warring with the nagging sense that pieces of her story still didn't fit together. And the locket? A gift from him. I kept it to remember. May I see it? Reluctantly, she handed him the small golden oval. Opening it, he examined the engraving more carefully. It wasn't just his first name. It was his full name, Xavier Valentine. This says Valentine, not Parker, he said quietly. Color drained from Kate's face. That's impossible. Xavier handed the locket back, watching as she stared at the engraving in disbelief. I don't understand, she whispered. How could this be your name? The question hung between them, unanswered as thunder crashed overhead. Where did you get this locket? Xavier asked finally. It was a gift from my fiancé. He said it had belonged to his mother. A memory stirred in Xavier's mind. His mother's jewelry, lost in the fire that claimed their homestead. A golden locket that his father had given her, engraved with his name, so she would always carry him close to her heart. When was your fiancé killed? He asked, his voice strained. 7 months ago. April 18th. Xavier's blood ran cold. April 18th, the day he'd been shot during a cattle rustling incident at a ranch near Denver. The doctors had declared him dead for nearly 2 minutes before his heart started beating again. Kate, he said slowly, I think I need to tell you about something that happened to me in Denver. Through the night, as the storm gradually subsided, Xavier and Kate pieced together a story that seemed impossible. Xavier Parker and Xavier Valentine, 2 men with the same first name, both working cattle in Colorado. One killed in what was reported as a train robbery, but was actually a cattle rustling gone wrong. The other, Xavier Valentine, mistakenly identified as the deceased, before surprising everyone by surviving his wounds. He spoke of you often, Xavier said softly. Parker was a good man. We worked the same outfit for nearly a year. You knew him? Kate whispered, astonished. We were friends. He showed me that locket once, said it was a family heirloom he was saving for his bride back east. Xavier paused, the truth dawning on him with painful clarity. When I was shot, they found his things with mine. We shared a bunkhouse. They must have mixed up our identifications. So he really is gone, Kate said, fresh grief etching lines around her eyes. Yes, Xavier confirmed gently. I'm sorry. In the gray light of dawn, they sat in silence, the revelations settling between them like the dust after a storm. What will you do now? Xavier asked finally. Kate's hands moved protectively over her rounded abdomen. I don't know. I can't go home like this. My family made it clear I wasn't welcome until I'd resolved my situation. Resolved? Xavier repeated, a flash of anger surprising him. You mean given away your child? Kate nodded, unable to meet his eyes. A respectable family in Philadelphia. Everything arranged quietly. And is that what you want? What I want doesn't matter, she said bitterly. An unmarried mother has no place in society. Xavier stood abruptly, pacing the small cabin. This isn't Philadelphia. Out here, people need each other too much to discard someone over Eastern propriety. Even so, Kate replied, a woman alone with a child has few prospects for survival, east or west. Something shifted in Xavier's chest, a protective instinct he'd thought long buried after his family's deaths. His careful avoidance of attachment suddenly seemed hollow in the face of Kate's courage and the child of his friend growing beneath her heart. "What if you weren't alone?" he asked, the words surprising him as much as her. Kate looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" "Parker was my friend," Xavier said slowly. "He saved my life once during a stampede. I owe him a debt I can never repay." "You don't owe me anything," Kate insisted. "Not you," Xavier clarified. "His child. Your child." The baby chose that moment to make its presence known, a visible movement beneath the fabric of Kate's dress. She placed her hand over the spot, a small smile touching her lips despite her distress. "I have some money saved," Xavier continued, thinking aloud. "Enough for a small place of our own. Not much, but a start." Kate stared at him, comprehension dawning in her eyes. "Xavier Valentine, are you proposing marriage to a woman you barely know, carrying another man's child?" "I'm proposing a partnership," he corrected, though even as he said it, he recognized the half-truth in his words. Something about Kate James had breached his defenses from their first meeting. Parker would have wanted his child to have a father, and you to have protection. "A marriage of convenience," Kate said flatly. "At first, perhaps," Xavier admitted. "But I've seen how you work, how you face challenges. Out here, those qualities matter more than Eastern notions of courtship." Kate studied him, her green eyes searching his face. "You've spent years avoiding attachments, Mr. Valentine. Mrs. Morrison told me as much. Why change now?" Xavier couldn't fully explain the shift in his thinking, the crumbling of his conviction that isolation was the only safe path on the frontier. Instead, he said simply, "Because sometimes the greater risk is in refusing to reach for what might bring meaning." 2 weeks later, they stood before the circuit preacher in Cottonwood Springs. Kate wore a simple dress of pale blue, altered to accommodate her growing condition. Xavier had purchased a new shirt for the occasion, his usually tanned face clean-shaven for perhaps the first time since Kate had known him. The ceremony was brief, witnessed by Dr. James and his wife, along with Mr. and Mrs. Morrison. If the townspeople whispered about the bride's condition and the hasty arrangement, none dared do so within Xavier's hearing. That evening, Xavier brought Kate to a small homestead 10 miles west of town, 2 rooms and a lean-to, with a sturdy barn and corral. He'd purchased it from an elderly couple returning east, spending nearly all his savings in the process. "It's not much," he said as he carried her over the threshold, honoring tradition despite the unconventional nature of their union. "It's perfect," Kate replied, surveying the simple space with genuine appreciation. A place to begin. Their early married life settled into a cautious routine. Xavier took odd jobs breaking horses and helping with cattle drives, while Kate transformed the bare cabin into a home. They slept in separate corners of the main room, maintaining a respectful distance that grew increasingly difficult to bear as Xavier found himself drawn to Kate's quiet strength and gentle wisdom. 3 months after their wedding, a brutal winter storm swept across the territory. Xavier had been helping a neighboring ranch move cattle to lower pastures when the blizzard struck without warning. He fought his way home through blinding snow, fear gripping his heart at the thought of Kate alone in their isolated cabin. When he finally stumbled through the door, half frozen and exhausted, he found her calmly tending the fire, extra wood stacked neatly, provisions arranged for what might be days of confinement. "I was worried you wouldn't make it back," she said simply, helping him remove his ice-encrusted coat. "I promised I'd always come home to you," he replied, the words slipping out before he could consider their meaning. Kate's eyes met his, something unspoken passing between them. "Yes, you did." That night, as the wind howled outside, Xavier awoke to Kate's cry of pain. He found her sitting upright, hands pressed to her swollen abdomen. "The baby," she gasped. "It's too early." Terror seized Xavier. The nearest doctor was miles away, the roads impassable in the storm. "What can I do?" "Help me to the bed," Kate instructed, her face pale but composed. For hours, Xavier watched helplessly as Kate labored. He boiled water, gathered clean linens, and prayed to a God he hadn't addressed since his parents' deaths. When Kate's screams reached a crescendo, he held her hands, amazed by her strength and terrified by her vulnerability. "I can't do this," she sobbed during a particularly difficult contraction. "You can," Xavier assured her, brushing damp hair from her forehead. "You're the strongest person I know, Kate Valentine." Something in his voice reached her. She met his eyes, drawing strength from the conviction she found there. As dawn broke, their daughter entered the world, tiny but perfect, with a shock of dark hair and lungs that announced her arrival with impressive volume. "She's beautiful," Xavier whispered, watching as Kate cradled the infant against her breast. "She looks like him," Kate said softly, a mixture of joy and sorrow in her voice. Xavier studied the tiny features, searching for traces of his friend. "She has your eyes," he observed. "What will you name her?" Kate considered for a moment. "Hope," she decided, "because that's what she represents." Hope Valentine. Xavier tested the name, finding it settled perfectly in his heart. Parker would be proud. As winter gradually yielded to spring, Xavier watched Kate blossom into motherhood. Little Hope thrived despite her early arrival, growing stronger each day. Xavier found himself increasingly captivated by the tableau they presented, mother and daughter illuminated by firelight, as Kate sang soft lullabies from her Eastern childhood. One evening, as Xavier returned from tending the small herd of cattle he'd begun to accumulate, he paused in the doorway, struck by the scene before him. Kate sat by the window, nursing Hope while reading aloud from one of her precious books. The setting sun bathed them in golden light, creating a vision of domestic tranquility he'd never imagined possible in his life. In that moment, Xavier understood that his careful avoidance of attachment had been rooted not in wisdom, but in fear. The frontier was harsh, yes, but facing it alone was a self-imposed sentence he no longer wished to serve. "You're staring," Kate observed, looking up with a smile that reached her eyes. "I'm admiring," he corrected, crossing the room to join them. That night, after Hope was settled in her cradle, Xavier found Kate standing on the porch, gazing at the stars. "Do you regret it?" he asked, moving to stand beside her. "Marrying me instead of returning east." Kate turned to face him, her expression thoughtful. "I regret many things, Xavier. The circumstances that brought me here. The pain my family caused with their rejection." She paused, reaching for his hand. "But marrying you? Never." Something shifted between them, the careful distance they'd maintained dissolving like morning mist under the rising sun. "Kate," Xavier began, his voice rough with emotion, "I know our arrangement began as a practical solution, but I find myself—" A rider approaching at speed interrupted his confession. Instinctively, Xavier stepped in front of Kate, his hand moving to the pistol at his hip. The man reined his horse to a stop before their cabin, his face obscured by the gathering darkness. "I'm looking for Katherine James," he called. Xavier felt Kate stiffen beside him. "Who's asking?" he demanded. "Her brother-in-law, Dr. James," the rider replied, dismounting. "Is she here?" Kate moved forward. "Benjamin? What's happened? Is Elizabeth all right?" The doctor approached, removing his hat. "Elizabeth is fine. It's your father, Kate. He's here in the territory, looking for you." "My father," Kate whispered, her face draining of color. "How did he find me?" "He arrived in Cottonwood Springs 3 days ago," Dr. James explained. "He's demanding you return to Philadelphia with him. Says he's found a family willing to take the child despite the circumstances." Xavier's hand found Kate's shoulder, steadying her. "Kate is my wife now," he stated firmly. "And Hope is our daughter. Her father has no claim here." Dr. James nodded. "I told him as much. But Josiah James is not a man accustomed to being refused. He's offering a substantial sum for your cooperation." "He's trying to buy his own grandchild?" Xavier asked incredulously. "He's trying to preserve the family name," the doctor corrected, though his tone suggested he found the notion as distasteful as Xavier did. "He plans to visit tomorrow. I thought you should have warning." After the doctor departed, Kate sat heavily at their small table, her face troubled. "My father is a powerful man," she said quietly, "used to getting his way through money or intimidation." Xavier knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "This isn't Philadelphia, Kate. His money doesn't command the same respect here. And you're my wife now. Legally, he has no authority over you or Hope." "You don't understand," Kate insisted. "He'll find a way. He always does." Xavier cupped her cheek gently. "Do you want to go with him?" "No." The vehemence in her voice startled them both. "This is my home now. You and Hope are my family. Then we'll face him together," Xavier promised, the words sealing something vital between them. The next morning, Josiah James arrived at their homestead in a rented carriage, his expensive Eastern suit and imperious manner immediately setting him apart from the frontier landscape. Kate stood on the porch to receive him, Hope in her arms and Xavier at her side. Katherine, her father greeted coldly, not bothering to dismount. I see the reports were accurate. You've disgraced yourself thoroughly. Xavier felt Kate tremble beside him, but admired how she lifted her chin defiantly. Hello, father. This is my husband, Xavier Valentine, and our daughter, Hope. The older man's gaze flicked dismissively over Xavier before returning to Kate. This charade has gone on long enough. I've made arrangements. The child will be placed with a respectable family, and you will return home where this indiscretion can be forgotten. The only place Katherine is going is wherever she chooses, Xavier stated firmly. And Hope stays with her parents. Josiah James finally turned his full attention to Xavier, assessing him with cold calculation. I understand you're a man of limited means, Mr. Valentine. I'm prepared to offer $5,000 for your cooperation in this matter. You're trying to buy your own grandchild? Xavier repeated his words from the previous night, anger building in his chest. I'm trying to restore order, James corrected. Katherine was engaged to a respectable businessman before she allowed herself to be seduced by some cowboy who promptly got himself killed. This match is beneath her. That cowboy was Xavier Parker, Xavier said, his voice dangerously quiet. He was my friend and a better man than you'll ever understand. The child Katherine carries is his legacy, and I'm proud to give her my name. Something in Xavier's tone caused the older man to reassess him. Parker? The name Katherine's associate used was Valentine. No, father, Kate interrupted. His name was Parker. There was a confusion after his death. Josiah James frowned. Then you admit this man isn't the father of your child? Xavier Valentine is the only father Hope will ever know, Kate declared firmly. And he is my husband by choice, not necessity. Hope began to fuss, sensing the tension around her. Kate bounced her gently, murmuring softly until the baby quieted. You've clearly been bewitched by this frontier existence, her father said dismissively. When you come to your senses, my offer remains open. Until then, you are no daughter of mine. As the carriage pulled away, Kate remained straight-backed and composed. Only when the dust had settled did she allow her shoulders to slump. Are you all right? Xavier asked gently. Kate turned to him, unexpected fire in her green eyes. Better than all right. For the first time in my life, I stood up to him. She gazed down at Hope, then back at Xavier. For the family I choose. That night, after Hope was asleep, Xavier found Kate sitting by the fire, her fingers absently touching the locket around her throat. I never thanked you, she said as he sat beside her. For giving Hope your name. For giving us both a home. Kate, Xavier began, gathering his courage. I need to tell you something. She turned to him, the firelight catching the gold of her hair. Yes. When I offered marriage, I told you it was for Parker's sake. For his child. Xavier took her hands in his. But the truth is, from the moment I saw you in that dusty street, something in me recognized something in you. Like a piece I didn't know was missing. Kate's eyes widened. Xavier, I thought loving someone out here was a weakness, he continued. That attachment was a liability the frontier would exploit. But I was wrong, Kate. So wrong. His voice roughened with emotion. Loving you and Hope, it's not weakness. It's the only real strength I've ever known. Tears welled in Kate's eyes. I've been afraid to Hope, she whispered. Afraid that you'd wake up one day and regret being tied to another man's child. To a woman you married out of obligation. Never, Xavier vowed, reaching up to touch her cheek. Every day with you teaches me something new about courage, about resilience. I'm a better man for loving you, Kate Valentine. You love me? She asked, her voice barely audible. In answer, Xavier leaned forward, pressing his lips to hers in their first true kiss. Kate responded with a passion that matched his own, years of loneliness and fear dissolving in the warmth between them. When they finally parted, breathless, Xavier rested his forehead against hers. I love you both more than I believe possible. You are my home, Kate. You and Hope. And you are ours, Kate whispered, her hands framing his face. The locket led me to you for a reason. Perhaps Parker knew, somehow, that you would be the one to teach me what love truly means. That night, husband and wife in truth at last, They crossed the final frontier between them. 5 years later, Xavier stood on the porch of their expanded homestead, watching as Kate instructed their children in the garden they'd planted together. Hope, now a sturdy 5-year-old with her mother's determination and her biological father's dark hair, carefully showed her 3-year-old brother, James, how to water the tender seedlings. The Valentine Ranch had prospered beyond Xavier's most ambitious dreams. Their cattle herd numbered in the hundreds now, and the modest cabin had grown into a proper ranch house, with room for their expanding family. Kate looked up, sensing his gaze, and smiled. That same smile that had first breached his defenses all those years ago. She still wore the locket, though now it contained tiny portraits of their children alongside the engraved name that had brought them together. As Xavier joined his family in the garden, lifting little James into his arms while Hope chattered excitedly about the butterflies among the flowers, he marveled at the journey that had brought them here. From a man determined to stand alone against the frontier to a husband and father rooted in the strength of family. The West remained as harsh and beautiful as ever, but Xavier no longer faced it in isolation. With Kate at his side and their children between them, he had discovered a truth the frontier had been teaching all along, that survival wasn't about avoiding attachment, but about finding the connections worth fighting for. And as Kate's fingers intertwined with his, Xavier knew with unshakable certainty that what had begun as an act of obligation had transformed into the greatest blessing of his life, a love as vast and enduring as the western sky above them.